Awesome. Welcome to this podcast on the truth about dyslexia. You might be watching this as a video on YouTube, or you might be listening on iTunes, Spotify, or something similar. Today, I have an interview with Darren from over in the United Kingdom. You know, it's amazing technology these days, how we can do these interviews. And Darren's been very kind to come on and have a bit of a chat about his experience with dyslexia, his story, a little bit about what he's doing in the workplace, because I know employment is something I get asked a huge amount about. So he's got some great insight. And then at the end, we're going to talk just a little bit about what he's doing in the greater dyslexia sphere and how you can be part of it. So welcome, Darren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a massive fan of all of your work, so it's a great honor to be on your show. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. And like when you shared that video of ours, I loved the response it got.
Yeah.
It was great. I was amazed, to be honest.
It went crazy, and a lot of people were because we shared it on our other sites, like on the Facebook site as well, and people were sort of PMing, sharing it into groups. So yeah, it was great. It was really really good. So yeah, thank you for making it. I loved it because it was just so unusual. It was different to what the other ones that I've seen, and it just kind of hit the button really. So
yeah, it's amazing though as well with the reading. Like we were just talking before about it. Is around reading and writing is always the thing that people think of, and no one's talking about all the other pain that people are going through, the uncertainty, and what the way you think affects you, kind of thing. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and I think anything that you can create that resonates to someone that what they're going through. And I think using that video, so to speak, why it's so popular is because people can relate to it from straight away. Because when we mention dyslexia, it's more or less okay. So that person finds it difficult reading and writing, but it's so much more. It's as we discussed before, the anxiety. It can even bring in the mental health side of it, depression. It can and the frustration to not be able to do something. So it's so much more than just the reading and writing.
It is, and it's great. It's always great to meet people that are on a similar journey. It's the more of us that are talking about this, the more of us that are bringing the attention to it, the more likely we're going to be able to make a massive difference. And usually how I start these interviews off is, I'd love to hear your story. My listeners love a story, as you can imagine. Things like how you found out about your dyslexia and kind of how it's affected your life's journey. If you want to give it a
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I didn't find out I was dyslexic until the age of 36. So it was quite a late stage, 43 now. So prior to that, everything that I did was undiagnosed dyslexia. So it was one of those things where that there's something wrong or something different in the way that you see the world, or the way that you're trying to relate to trying to fit in. So those kind of things I really struggled in. I love primary school. Primary school was great because it was lots of just being a kid, I guess. And it wasn't until secondary school that really when there was tests and you were put into certain classrooms on your ability to be able to get the tasks done, that was really, really difficult. So I spent most of my time in this thing called the unit, which is not an elite police force. It's actually a porter cabin, which was put basically in the football field, and it's kind of where they put children there if they're in their terminology bad kids, not or misbehaving. So I spent most of my years, kind of 5 years really, just doing kind of with a substitute teacher, doing colouring in, and wasn't allowed to kind of sit any lessons that I sat in. I'd struggle. Because I was asking the question, I was kind of trying to, that moment where you just look at something and go, why don't I get it? I used to go home from school every day with a massive headache, just because your brain's just trying to, trying to decode it, trying to kind of analyze what it is. So school was really, really tricky. And subsequently I left school with not a single qualification, still undiagnosed dyslexia, still not knowing why it was different. And it wasn't, but that kind of, that entrepreneurial or that kind of that fight in you to think to yourself, well, actually, yes, you left school with no qualifications, but there's got to be something. And I don't know if most dyslexic are always searching for something or trying to find, we discussed prior to this, how we try and see a task and we find a different way around it to try and, to still get the task completed, but just, still try and, a different way. And so I left school and I think I applied for like 16, 17 jobs after school. And these were only part-time jobs. I literally would walk into any shop and ask if I could have a job. And the trouble was, I even walked into a bank and asked for a job, and they were thinking I applied to go into a funeral parlor. I applied, fruit and veg shops, anything, just to try. And I was riding around the area on my BMX, just trying to find employment. And filling in the application form was always very difficult for me because of my reading. Writing was really, really bad at that stage. So my mum used to help me fill in the application forms. This was back then, prior to the internet. So we had to fill in the forms. And we would, I always remember the application forms that we were putting in, there was a box at the top right-hand side of it. And it was where you would put your qualifications. So you would say, humanities or English or science, you'd put B, C, or D, whatever the grade you got. And I would always leave that box blank because there was no grades to put in there. And it wasn't until I was applying for Sainsbury's, a food outlet, and I remember walking in with this application form that my mum had helped me fill in. And as I went in, I looked at that top box, and it was kind of an epiphany or whatever it was. And I thought to myself, that's the box that's stopping me from getting a job interview, because everyone was denying me to have an interview. So I sat on the curb on the pavement, and I thought to myself, well, what grades would I have got if I had taken the exams? And I'm not condoning that we lie. It's creativity. So I sat there with a pen and kind of scrawled in, science. I didn't want to give myself great grades, so I did the C's and D's. And do you know what? And this is the sadness of it, is that I don't know whether I got the interview and the job because I filled that box in or I didn't. So, we'll never know. But realistically, it's sad that we were in a position where, I would have to leave that box blank because there was no grades, there was no support in school. Fast forward.
Here's a quick question. Like, as I say, just as we go through, I'll just pick out a few things.
Please do.
I love that, because that's brilliant, a brilliant way. And, it's just working around, you've got to work around the left brain system, when you're right brained. And one question I'd have for you that I hear a lot from dyslexics is we sometimes, like, some of us are overly confident in interviews. I always remember that if I could get the interview, I would nail it. I could talk. The technical term is out my ass, and I could get through. I could get through any interview, and I could make them love me. I could very quickly pick up on empathy and what they wanted to hear. And you kind of worked to the system. Like, did you find that similar yourself once you got into the room?
Stephen, absolutely 100%. 100%. When I was growing up, I just loved people. I loved talking to people. I knew that I could kind of win them round in the empathy side of it. I can kind of read people in that kind of way. So I can guess whether they're, that moment when you're talking and someone starts thinking, would this person be quiet? I'm bored. I pick up on these things straight away. So I then deter it around. So I knew as a very early age that if I could get into an interview or talk to someone, then I can kind of win them round. But it was that I was literally denied via the system of the paperwork side of it, because I didn't have the qualifications needed to get it. And these weren't jobs. I wasn't applying to go to college or university or any apprentice roles or any management roles. I mean, when I say I applied for this job and got it, it was 12 hours a week pushing trolleys in a supermarket. So subsequently. But do you know what? I treasured that job so much, because it was the first time in all of my school years and growing up that I could actually do something and be good at it, and given an opportunity to be able to be good at it. So I was kind of like the best trolley boy ever, because I just got a real buzz, because it was, I don't know, school was difficult because there were so many barriers that you weren't allowed to do this, you couldn't do this. And when you were given something, you couldn't do anyway. So your confidence was just, more or less zero. So fast forward that, I had a real love for retail, and I had numerous different jobs. Worked as a car salesman. I even worked in a factory, sticking stickers on a box on a book and then packing them in a box. Any job you can kind of think of, I would do. But my love for retail really pushed me. So I kind of managed to get up to quite a senior position within one of the main retailers, like a regional manager. But that was with all undiagnosed dyslexia. So I say, the journey was, I got to there, but there was so many situations where sleepless nights and if I had to do a presentation in the morning, I would do 5 or 6 preparations prior to that, just in case they asked for a certain one, so I wouldn't have to walk up and do the presentation in front of them, as in, writing on the board or anything else like that. These things that I experience, especially in a management role, especially when you're being paid a very high salary, you're looking after many stores, many members of staff as well. I just felt completely and utterly burnt out. I mean, they say your brain frazzles. It actually felt like it was just burning, because I was just literally just trying to work at the speed and the pace that I was working at. So come to my diagnosis. It wasn't until I actually left my high-paid profile job. And this is the thing, titles for me, I'm not too fussed with titles. I don't mind if I'm pushing trolleys, cleaning toilets, or I'm a regional manager, or I'm doing this and this. For me, it's about learning in the journey. So I thought to myself, if I'd gone from trolley collector 12 hours a week all the way up to regional manager, then I could theoretically do something for myself. So I left my job and literally started a cleaning round. Now, I say it's a cleaning round, but more or less I thought it was like a cleaning business. And I thought after year 1, I'd have thousands of staff and this is this. But when you're 3.5 years in and you're still cleaning 7 days a week yourself personally, right. It was a tough slog. But we grew, myself and my partner, we grew several cleaning businesses. We grew it to kind of the home business, 1,000 cleans a week. The commercial business, we grew it to, so we've hired hundreds and hundreds of staff over the years. So that element of it. But going back to the dyslexia diagnosis, everyone has this moment of when they understand that they are dyslexic, or how they go about it. And I'm not saying that everyone needs a diagnosis. That's because some people get worried about, I don't want to be labeled, especially with children. They say, I don't want my child labeled as a dyslexic, because then that might not stop them from wanting to achieve something. But for me, it was, I heard a news broadcast in the afternoon. It was kind of like this thing in England we have, it's like a Points West or something. So they have sort of 30 minutes of news. And there was a lady on there, and she was talking about her floristry business. And it was where I was kind of working. I started my business at this point. I was kind of 1 year in my business. And I heard this interview in the background. And this lady said, "Why did you start your floristry business?" And she said, well, I'm dyslexic and I see everything in pictures, and I love flowers. I can't spell the flowers and the bouquets I make, but I can tell you exactly what they are from these bouquets and this. And she kept saying the word dyslexic, and she kept saying pictures, and it was almost like it was subliminal. It was almost like I connected with the way that I see the world. And it was that one moment at the age of 36 that I kind of stopped, listened to it. Then I Googled dyslexia once I realized how we can spell it. And then it went for the process then of, I did a short online test, and it came out that you were, I think it was kind of severe dyslexia. And then I went in and thought, well, what if? And then I went in and paid for a test, and it came back that I had a severe dyslexia, and ADHD.
Yeah, seems to be very common, those two together.
It is. And then you got dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and all these other kind of SPLDs. But that moment, I've got friends that and people that I've connected with when they say, well, I had my diagnosis that I was dyslexic, and it ruined me. I slept for weeks. I didn't want to do this and this. For me, I don't know what it was. It was like a click. I just went, I get it. And then then I realized that I was so hard on myself for some of the promotions that I didn't get, or some of the stuff that I didn't do. And it kind of, I suppose it kind of helped me understand me as a person. It didn't cure anything. It didn't say, now you've found out you've got dyslexia, everything's fine, because it wasn't, in the sense of, you still struggle with the day-to-day things. But then we went on I then started thinking, okay, so if it's affected me and I've been undiagnosed, how do we then help other people? How do we make people more recognized? Because, we're talking, many years ago that, dyslexia now is, we've got organizations where, we're spreading the awareness of it a lot more now, but it's still unheard of in some places. You know, you take this, the school system in our in the UK. I think it's statistically 53% of headmasters in secondary educational schools in England don't actually believe dyslexia exists. Now,
oh, you're joking. That's crazy.
So when you're dealing with, and I'm not saying all of them, I'm just saying there's a large percentage of people that in the educational side of it that don't. So when you go there as a parent, or you go there and you say, well, you know, my son, my daughter may have dyslexia, and it's not even on the radar, then you can imagine it's so difficult. So it's kind of a bit of a journey then, where that took me. And I think from the educational side of it, I've spoken, as well as the business. I love growing businesses and being entrepreneurial, but there was a real kind of element of giving back. And, you know, I've spoken to just shy of 80,000 students over the kind of the past 8-9 years. These kind of been, even this is the thing, I have a real love for education, even though I didn't have the education. I understand it. I appreciate it. And I think it's definitely something that, you know, every child deserves, you know, it should be given. So just shy of 80,000 students. That's been in secondary school, universities, colleges, youth projects. You know, it's kind of areas where education, if a child has dyslexia and they struggle, they're just kind of written off. So yeah, I've done, you know, mentorship as well. So then I kind of done the school element, and I thought, okay, so we've done the school element, or we're doing the school element. Where can I take it next? So then I thought, well, what about the business sector? Now, I was doing some kind of talks at expos, in shows and things, and I thought, well, no one's talking about dyslexia. Everyone's talking about business. Because you go to an expo and you know, business expo, and you expect the keynote speaker to be talking about business. Well, I talked about business and entrepreneurship, but I also talked about dyslexia. So that allowed me then to kind of really share it in the educational, the business sector. And then I don't know if you want me to go on now, but
we'll come back to that. I just want to make sure, I just want to pick up on some of the things you've said. They'll add a lot of value to the audience, because, you know, it's a brilliant story. And, you know, it's interesting. It's very similar in what I'm learning, because I did my first talk a few weeks back on dyslexia, and it was amazing. There was only 20 odd people in the room, but the amount of them that said, oh yeah, my son is Asperger's, my kid's autistic. And, you know, once, you know, you would know this as well, once you've been in this industrial community long enough, you start to be very quick at picking up who potentially could have dyslexia. And it's amazing in the business community, the numbers. And, you know, the thing that, you know, I always talk about is Yale has come out and said quite clearly, they believe 20%